Lil Yachty is one of the most confusing figures in hip-hop of all time. Much like his predecessor Soulja Boy, someone who he's taken a lot of influence from but has also beefed with, Yachty has spent the majority of his career in a frustrating crossroads between love and hate from the public.
Tell me what you want from hip-hop.
I don't know. I mean...
You don't think that's a question you should answer at some point?
Well,
you don't sound like you very aware with what's going on, and you one of the hottest niggas on earth.
But what do you want me to say?
From being the leader of the new school to beefing with the entire previous generation of hip-hop, to then having beef with the current generation of hip-hop, from being on top of the world to falling off drastically, to then making a massive comeback in the most unconventional way possible, Lil Yachty has had one of the most confusing but captivating and unique careers out of any artist within this generation. And while at one point he could have been considered the laughingstock of his 2016 XXL freshman class, Yachty maneuvered his way out of falling off drastically and rebranded himself as one of the most lovable figures within the culture today. So for any rapper that's watching this, take notes, because in this video we will be diving into how Lil Yachty escaped the fall off.
There's a lot of little nuggets in both of their disses that if it wasn't for these breakdowns, and salute to, guys like this, Rapaholics and everybody else, because I think they directly get it.
But first we have to understand the fall on, how he fell into the rap game, basically.
So you have to you have to have goals in life. You can't just expect everything knocked on the door.
Yachty was raised in Atlanta and actually used to work at a McDonald's for some extra cash. You'll see later in this video that a lot of things come full circle for Yachty in his career, but I think the biggest thing is actually that he went from working at McDonald's as a teenager to actually starring in a McDonald's commercial just this year. If that's not a full circle moment, it's definitely a golden arcs moment, if you know what I mean. I'm loving it. Alright, now let's move on from these corny jokes and talk about how this once corny rapper avoided fading into oblivion. So Yachty dropped out of Alabama State University back in 2015 and built up a small buzz through Instagram and SoundCloud. He was one of the first quote-unquote SoundCloud rappers, with his first record, I Got the Bag, being posted on SoundCloud over 10 years ago. But Yachty would really get the bag and be able to quit his job at McDonald's in December of 2015 when the content creator Sensei LaFox used Lil Yachty's song One Night in a skit on YouTube. Now, this marked the beginning of a lot of things, right? Nowadays, it's very common for artists to have a viral moment or song and literally just be able to blow up and create a career off that hype. Another full circle moment for Yachty is seeing him experience resurgences in his career through viral moments as recently as last year. This is a very common theme within his career, but again, back in 2015, major labels, executives, A&Rs had a much bigger hand in the initial push of a new artist. And seeing Lil Yachty create a career based off one viral moment online was a very unconventional way of starting a full-fledged mainstream rap career at the time. 2015 also marked the beginning of the end for lyrical rap being the most dominant subgenre of hip-hop within the mainstream, as we saw guys like Travis Scott and Future release some of the biggest projects of the year with Rodeo and DS2, propelling them into superstardom while also experiencing the massive come-up of newcomers like Fetty Wap and Young Thug, who brought a very unique, more melodic-based, quote-unquote, mumble style to the forefront of hip-hop. And the momentum that guys like Future, Thug, and Fetty Wap had were the catalyst and set up Lil Yachty to become the biggest, most polarizing figure within hip-hop in 2016. And that's exactly what happened. This red dread, college dropout teenager became the biggest new act within the genre, with his viral track One Night hitting the top 50 of the Billboard Hot 100, and even making an appearance in February 2016 at the Life of Pablo listening party / Yeezy Season 3 fashion show. He was one of the models along with Young Thug. And if you needed any further reassurance that hip-hop was headed in a different direction at this time, you didn't need to look any further than at that event. Kanye West, who was the leader and at the forefront of innovation within the culture, premiered an album full of features with quote-unquote mumble rappers like Desiigner and Young Thug, while also incorporating heavy trap production, auto-tune drenched deliveries, and lyrics about bleached butts that sounded like they belonged on a Future album. He also stopped the show to let Young Thug steal the aux cord and play one of his new songs as well, showing that he was fully embracing this new generation of artists and that we would have no choice but to do the same. And we really didn't, because between the time that Kanye dropped The Life of Pablo to when he took it on tour just 6 months later and started ranting about Trump on stage, in that same time period, we saw Lil Yachty rise to the top of the SoundCloud rapper food chain, becoming at the time arguably the biggest rapper within his 2016 XXL freshman class. See, the cover dropped in the summer of 2016 and featured artists that we now know today as some of the forefront leaders within the culture, such as 21 Savage, Kodak Black, Lil Uzi Vert, Anderson .Paak, Denzel Curry, and to a lesser extent, Desiigner and Lil Dicky. But we're really only going to focus on 4 rappers from this cover because these 4 rappers became some of the biggest artists within the mainstream and were put into the same box that Lil Yachty was put into way back in 2016. The artists I'm talking about are obviously Lil Yachty and 21 Savage, Kodak Black, and Lil Uzi Vert. The first time mumble rap was displayed on a global scale was during that 2016 XXL freestyle, and the world thought much differently of it back then than they do now. The emergence of SoundCloud rap marked a massive divide between the new school and the old school. As streaming platforms became the most dominant form of music consumption, the importance or significance of high-quality studio albums diminished as we saw a lot of these newer rappers, especially the ones that came off of that XXL freshman cover, gain their traction and their popularity and notoriety through singles and mixtapes, focusing more on views from SoundCloud than praise from critics on any project they released. And while Lil Yachty was at the forefront of this brand new movement within hip-hop, his circumstance was a little bit different. See, his peers on the XXL freshman cover, while they may not have been as big as Yachty from a mainstream perspective, they were a lot more respected and engulfed within hip-hop culture, if that makes sense. See, what I mean by that is you had guys like Kodak Black who made street music reminiscent to the sounds we heard from Lil Boosie or Lil Wayne in the past, ditching the auto-tune for innovative deliveries on records like Skrilla or No Flocking, showing his respects to legends by naming his project Lil Big Pac in ode to Tupac and Biggie, while also receiving respect from the older generation, garnering features very early on in his career from pioneers like Gucci Mane and Lil Wayne. Meanwhile, while guys like 21 Savage and Lil Uzi came in the game with a unconventional, mumble-based sound and aesthetic similar to Lil Yachty, they were able to leverage many of hip-hop's top resources to create some of the most classic trap projects and singles of all time. Think Savage Mode or Lil Uzi Vert versus the World. These projects wouldn't have the impact that they have or even be possible to have been created without Savage and Uzi having access to the top producers in the game like Metro Boomin and Zaytoven, or the top artists in the game like Future and Young Thug. So while his peers had more conventional rises to stardom, Lil Yachty was left as the quote-unquote outcast of the bunch. Yeah, he was an Atlanta rapper with colorful dreads, and he mumbled on trap beats full of autotune, but his first few major hits that cemented him as one of the top rappers of the new generation within the game back in 2016, all those songs sounded like nursery school rhymes. I'm talking about iSpy with Kyle, Broccoli with DRAM, or Minnesota by Lil Yachty. I mean, there's a reason that these tracks, some of Lil Yachty's biggest hits, don't have the staying power that some of 21 Savage's earlier hits have, like No Heart or X. But those nursery songs helped Lil Yachty appeal to a much wider audience than his peers. This led him to sign massive endorsement deals extremely early on in his career. He became the creative designer at Nautica and signed a massive record deal with QC Records, home of the Migos. So it didn't seem to matter so much that he didn't have love from the hip-hop heads because he had the attention of the younger generation. However, no matter how much of the youth Yachty carried on his back, that buzz would matter seemingly less and less as 2016 progressed, and hip-hop fans got more of a perspective of the character that Lil Yachty truly was. See, I think at this point, Yachty thought that being the outcast of the music industry was his superpower, and he took this a little too far. For a couple reasons, and we'll get into each and every one of them, starting off with the fact that in summer of 2016, some old tweets leaked from Lil Yachty's Twitter where he was seen saying F J. Cole. When he was asked about it, his response was, I don't know why. Back in the day, I was heavy on saying F J. Cole. I don't know why, alright? Let me clear this up. I used to say that a lot. The first one was back in 2011, I was in like 10th grade, I think. I F with J. Cole as a person, but I don't listen to J. Cole. I have nothing against J. Cole. I was young. I was just trolling. I didn't think I was gonna be a rapper. People didn't really appreciate this response from Yachty because it seemed extremely unapologetic and slightly arrogant, right? As a rapper who garnered his fame less than a year ago was seen disrespecting a legend, and instead of apologizing and trying to approach J. Cole's music with an open mind, he instead doubled down on his claims that he doesn't like J. Cole as an artist, or at least doesn't listen to him. And the only reason why he regrets saying F J. Cole is because he didn't realize he would become a rapper and maybe now have to bump into J. Cole or get to know him as a person. Now, Lil Yachty's disrespect for the older generation only got worse that summer as he did an interview with Billboard and told them that he honestly could not name 5 songs from either Tupac or Biggie. When he was asked if he thinks it's problematic that he hasn't taken the time to listen to and pay respects to the rappers that came before him and paved the way for him, he said, "If I'm doing this my way and making all this money, why should I do it how everyone says it's supposed to be done? I've found myself. I'm like the youth's big brother now. I have to be the voice for them." This pissed off everybody in hip-hop, both old and young, and marked the start of Lil Yachty going from the most beloved leader of the new school to the most hated figure within hip-hop. Even his XXL freshman classmate, Anderson .Paak, responded to Lil Yachty's comment saying, "Don't be cocky in the fact that you don't know nothing about hip-hop history. Real artists are students of the game first." And this was just the surface of the beefs that would ensue from these comments. As Lil Yachty was attacked by everyone, both new school and old school, he was beefing with Soulja Boy over India Love, legendary hip-hop producer Pete Rock, who's worked with Biggie, A Tribe Called Quest, Common, Nas, and countless others, went on Instagram and wrote, "No matter what you say, he's hot garbage and that's the end of it. This ain't no argument. He has no skill." At the time, Pete Rock was also calling out Young Dolph for the quality of his music as well. And Lil Yachty responded to this by saying, like Dolph said, F a Pete Rock. When he realized that he's just further pissing off old heads by dissing one of their legends, he kind of walked back his comments by saying, "I ain't mad at Pete Rock. That's his personal preference, because personally, I don't like his type of music either. So it's not F you, it's bless you. Because at the end of the day, what we're doing over here is not going to stop growing because an old head doesn't like it. The world's going to continue to spin." Around the same time, Lil Yachty responded to a tweet which read, "Lil Yachty is the new Nas," and he responded by saying, "I don't want to be Nas, I want to be rich." He also said, "I love this tweet for the simple fact of how mad it will make old people." Yachty here is showing you back in 2016 that he was ready to go full force into the war with the older generation. And Ebro, a journalist and personality on the radio station Hot 97, responded to these tweets by saying, "The troll is a part of who these new rappers are. I wish bars and great music were too." Lil Yachty, again, ready to go full force into this war, tweeted back at Ebro saying, "God, I was waiting on you, GPA Ebro. How you doing? Take your meds and drink your coffee this morning?" Yachty then went up to Ebro's radio show for an interview, where Ebro pressed him on all the comments he's been making, all the hate he's been getting, and what he actually feels his position is within hip-hop. And that's when Yachty responded that he actually doesn't consider himself a rapper. Ebro also tried to stump him by getting him to freestyle over a 90s beat, to which Lil Yachty actually didn't spit a half-bad freestyle by today's standards, and he also made a joke out of the thing by saying, "I feel like I'm 40 years old rapping on this beat." And while the hate seemed serious on the other side, Lil Yachty kind of seemed to be making a joke out of it or keeping it playful, but at the same time still doubling down on the fact that he didn't feel responsible for studying the greats or paying respect to anyone who came before him. He wrote on Instagram, "You know what? I think it's funny how people feel like you have to like something just because everyone else does. Or like I have to know something. Where in the handbook of hip-hop does it say you must know this list of songs to make music?" So at this point, it's been less than a year since Lil Yachty's been in the game. He's already dropped 2 projects, multiple hits, said that he doesn't want to be like Nas, said that he doesn't know any Biggie or Tupac songs, disrespected J. Cole, beefed with Ebro, Pete Rock, and Soulja Boy, and he hasn't even dropped his debut album yet. And you know the saying, all publicity is good publicity. So no matter how much hate Yachty was getting, the eyeballs on him only grew bigger. The standards and expectations for what we could expect from future music from him only grew as he was so confident in his sound that he didn't feel like it was necessary to pay homage or study the greats that came before him. And to go back to his peers on the XXL freshman class, After Kodak Black, he was the first one to drop a debut album. Kodak received pretty solid success. He spawned one of his biggest hits with Tunnel Vision, and his album sold 71,000 copies in the first week, which is a great accomplishment for your first album. And Lil Yachty was up next, gearing up to drop his first album, Teenage Emotions, in May of 2017. He already had multiple Billboard charting hits. He was already beefing with like half the industry. He was the most polarizing figure within the game, appearing at Kanye West's fashion show and being a model for it, being the creative designer at Nautica, signing a massive record deal, and redefining the mindset and sound that the youth carried. It was assumed that with this massive hype and this persona that Yachty built up, he would have massive success with his first album. Now, in promotion for the album, Lil Yachty made an appearance on Joe Budden and DJ Akademiks' show at the time called Everyday Struggle. Joe Budden, being a classic old head, obviously had a ton of questions to ask Yachty, and spent the entire interview really questioning his passion for hip-hop and accused him of being a manufactured artist that lacked authenticity. He questioned him aggressively on his record contract and what he actually wanted to gain out of hip-hop. And this led to an aggressive exchange between the two, which further divided Yachty from the old school hip-hop community even more than he had been already. Yachty embodied that carefree, experimental approach, while Budden was trying to emphasize the importance of having respect for the culture that brought you this success, but also having respect for yourself by analyzing the type of contracts that you're signing and not getting yourself into something that will screw you over in the long term. Joe Budden would go on to say that Lil Yachty is not hip-hop and deem that he is ruining the culture. But Yachty kept taking that Outcast title and running with it. And I don't mean like Outcast like Andre 3000 and Big Boy. I mean like he was the outcast of the music industry and again ran with it. The cover art for his first album featured a group of individuals who he deemed as outcasts. There were two males kissing, there was some plus-sized women, there was an albino individual, there was a person with green hair. It wasn't your traditional hip-hop album cover full of diamonds or cars or money. And the music reflected this. It was extremely experimental, incorporating pop sounds, punk sounds, veering away from any form of traditional hip-hop in exchange for auto-tune drenched attempts at ballads and more emotional music. And even when he did try to rap, he had horrible lines like "She blow me like a cello." And even with all the attention that Yachty gained over the year, that carefree attitude that he had did not work in his favor when critics and fans alike absolutely trashed his first album, emphasizing the overcompensating attempt at trying to be experimental and the abuse of autotune and horrible rapping performances riddled throughout the album. The sales reflected the public's hatred for this album, as it only sold 46,000 copies in its first week, which wouldn't seem so bad for a debut album. However, with the buzz that Lil Yachty already garnered, with the amount of hits he already had, with everything we've already spoke about within this video, the amount of attention and eyeballs and controversy that this guy has garnered and stirred up, he was destined for success. And it was his own lack of effort, disrespect to the hip-hop community, and possibly his unwillingness to study the artists that came before him and take inspiration from their sounds and styles to actually merge the old and new school in a creative way instead of creating a divide between them. All of these factors led to Lil Yachty's initial demise. And for comparison, while he sold under 50,000 copies in his first week with his first album, his XXL freshman peers sold way more than him. 21 Savage and Kodak both selling over 70,000 copies in the first week with their first album, and Lil Uzi crushing the competition, selling over 130,000 copies with his first album within the first week. So at this point, Lil Yachty went from being the most popular rapper within his XXL freshman class to being the most hated and least popular artist within the class. And he definitely heard these criticisms because in the next year, in 2018, he dropped two projects, Lil Boat 2 and Nothing to Prove, which both focused on more of a traditional trap sound. He ditched the auto-tune, focused more on the bars, had features from some of the most popular artists within the game, like Juice WRLD, NBA Youngboy, Gunna, and Lil Baby, and saw Yachty trying to sharpen his pen while also staying out of the spotlight when it came to controversial comments and interviews. But this didn't seem to help Yachty's success, as with each project he released, he would sell less and less. And he was extremely close to just being deemed a has-been, someone that had the buzz at one time but fumbled the bag, never lived up to the hype, and never dropped a project that had that staying power that the rest of his peers had. To make matters worse, he became the first artist, or one of the first artists in the world, to fumble the Drake feature and not secure that stimulus package. As in the year 2020, him and Drake developed a friendship, which is going to be very important later on in this story. But at the time, they decided to collaborate with DaBaby, who also had a massive buzz at this period of time, for Lil Yachty's song Oprah's Bank Account. The song had a Drake feature, a DaBaby feature when he was in his prime, and a whole music video with a comedy skit from Drake and everything. And the song still managed to flop, falling off the charts almost immediately and having no staying power. And if his albums back in 2018, only selling around 30,000 copies in the first week, showed the world that Lil Yachty was not this massive superstar that we initially thought he was, him having a song with Drake absolutely flop on the charts emphasized to us that he was a shell of his former self from a commercial success perspective. But fast forward 1 year to 2021 and things changed massively for Lil Yachty. This was what marked his comeback. See, he leveraged his carefree experimental approach to music in a much more effective way by really eliminating any single gimmick that he carried early on in his career. He ditched the red dreadlocks, he abandoned the pop sound that he was chasing on his first album, and he linked up with underground Detroit rappers for his most unpredictable but bar-focused project to date with Michigan Boy Boat. The project featured fast-paced Detroit instrumentals, riddled with that signature offbeat, punchline-heavy delivery that the underground Michigan scene was known for. And this marked a new era for Yachty, where he really didn't seem to be trying to make any sort of statement or leave any big impact commercially. He was just having fun with the music and experimenting with new sounds while also trying to sharpen his skill set as an actual MC in a way that he was comfortable with. Because while he obviously felt very uncomfortable freestyling for Ebro over some 90s beats, he seemed very confident, laid back, and collected, spitting bars all over this Michigan Boy Boat project on these Detroit beats. And yeah, the project didn't sell that much, but it was refreshing to see Yachty having fun again. And he would continue just trying to have fun and not really worrying about the critics when he announced in January of 2022 that he would be working on a non-rap album intended to be a psychedelic alternative project. But in the midst of recording this project, Yachty went on Instagram and previewed a snippet to a brand new song which caught the internet by storm. It went absolutely viral just off the snippet alone, having guys like Drake, Wiz Khalifa, Offset, Denzel Curry, Steve Lacy, and others dancing to it on TikTok, including the rest of the world dancing to it on TikTok. And while the song was never intended to be officially released, it was again just a track that Lil Yachty was having fun recording. It went absolutely viral, with fans forcing him to release it and even creating the artwork for the single. And the song saw Yachty introducing a brand new flow to the rap game. Now, you could love him or hate him, but back in 2016, hip-hop denounced his association to the culture, while his peers like Kodak Black were bringing in new, unique flows to the game on songs like No Flockin'. But you fast forward 6 years later, and Lil Yachty is doing the same thing, contributing to hip-hop in a positive light, bringing in these new sounds and flows and deliveries, like the choppy, auto-tune, yawn-sounding vocal inflection that he introduced to the world on his viral track, Poland. So yeah, I forgot to mention the name of this track was Poland, and this became Yachty's biggest solo hit of his entire career, charting at number 40 on the Billboard charts and going gold in less than a year. So after being one of the most hated figures in the genre to then coming back 6 years later with the biggest hit of your career is pretty impressive, but it didn't stop there. See, even though his song with Drake flopped, him and Drake remained very good friends, and by the end of 2022, Lil Yachty was actually one of the executive producers on Drake and 21 Savage's collab album, Her Loss. This was a major look for Yachty, as he also wrote the songs Back Outside Boys and Jumbotron Popping for Drake directly. There's reference tracks that leaked of Lil Yachty rapping these tracks, and given the fact that at the time, Drake just came off a dance album that received horrible reception from critics and fans alike, Her Loss almost acted as a comeback album for Drake, and the fact that Lil Yachty had such a major hand in the production and creation of the album, it definitely left him in hip-hop's good graces, as you could attribute Drake's resurgence in the game to Lil Yachty's involvement within this project. But Lil Yachty kept having fun with it and remained on his quest to drop a psychedelic pop rock album. And just a couple months after executive producing an album for Drake, he did just that by dropping Let's Start Here, his first official non-hip-hop album. And while the experimental risks that Lil Yachty took on his first album, where he ditched hip-hop to blend more pop sounds, left critics and fans displeased, Let's Start Here did the exact opposite, becoming the highest rated album by critics of Lil Yachty's entire career. The Rolling Stones named it the 4th best album of 2023. Billboard and Complex had it in their top 10 of the best albums of 2023. And fans were extremely pleased with the approach that Yachty took on this album. So it's safe to say that Yachty has made a comeback, right? After being hated by the entire hip-hop community, flopping with his first album, struggling to gain traction or hits between 2017 and 2020, everything turned around for Yachty by 2021 when he executive produced Drake's album. He dropped his most critically acclaimed album to date and dropped his biggest hit of his entire career with Poland. But the comeback didn't stop here. Lil Yachty kept experiencing multiple other viral moments, including his insane walkouts at one of his concerts, which has newer rappers still trying to imitate and replicate that look. And continuing trends of going viral off Instagram snippets, having his record Strike go absolutely viral off Instagram to the point where, again, fans had to force him to release it. And it seems like Yachty, again, is in a spot right now where he's just having fun with things. He's not chasing that commercial success. He's really just doing what feels good to him. So much so to the point that even when he gets a hit and he previews it on Instagram, he doesn't even have plans of actually dropping the song. It has to be his fans that force him to release it. But the success didn't stop there. Yachty had another full circle moment in 2023 when he collaborated with J. Cole on the song The Secret Recipe, which was a track that featured no auto-tune, no hook, no 808 drums, just straight bars, and people actually attribute this song as having one of J. Cole's best feature verses of all time. So it's pretty incredible to think that Lil Yachty went from 8 years ago saying F J. Cole and that he didn't like his music to then producing a record that inspired J. Cole so much to the point where he produced one of his best verses in ages. He also appeared on Drake's latest album For All the Dogs and actually got Drake his first music video with Cole Bennett. Another full circle moment, as Yachty used to be the division between the old school and the new school, and now instead of his words and his actions and efforts dividing and separating the two different generations, he's actually merging them together, bringing Drake into Cole Bennett's world and bringing J. Cole into his own. And while he used to go on radio shows and interviews and just get crapped on by the entire hip-hop community, he has now built one of the biggest podcasts in hip-hop in less than a year. It's titled A Safe Space Podcast, and he actually secured the only J. Cole interview of last year, also having one of the only Drake interviews of the last 5 years. And ranking at number 12 by Complex on their Hip Hop Media Power Ranking for 2024, showing that someone who was not considered hip hop at one point and was viewed as one of the most negative, detrimental voices within the culture has now become one of the most positive, powerful voices within the culture, blending the new school and the old school together for unique collaborations and dialogue. He was actually also on record recently stating that hip hop is boring and that everything sounds the same, which he caught a lot of flack for, given the fact that a lot of his music lacks the lyrical superiority that the previous generation's music had. However, he emphasized that these comments were made to highlight the fact that there was a lack of originality within hip-hop music, and that even though he wasn't necessarily focused on being the best lyricist, he was still introducing new flows to the game, new sounds, experimenting, and again, love him or hate him, he's bringing something fresh to music that we do not hear any other rapper, or artist for that matter, accomplishing. So while Yachty came in the game as this larger-than-life figure, something the culture had never seen before, and quickly outpacing his entire XXL freshman competition, he then became the laughingstock of the hip-hop community, dropping what sounded like satirical efforts at experimental music, flopping horribly from a sales perspective, and for years seemed like he'd be tossed into the bin of the multitude of rappers that had fallen off, only to then make a comeback by keeping that inherent root of instinctively producing experimental soundscapes and genuinely just having fun with the music you're producing instead of focusing on reputation or likability or mainstream success. Yachty has found himself in currently one of the most unique positions within hip-hop, where he is a curator and executive producer for one of the biggest artists in the game. Even Kendrick rapped on his diss track against Drake saying, "Yachty can't give you no swag either," showing you that for a rapper who was once the laughingstock of the hip-hop community, he is now a tastemaker within that very same community. And while he was once someone whose opinion no one took seriously, he is now one of the most powerful voices within the culture, whether it's through his podcasts, his executive producer type role for some of the biggest rappers in the game like Drake and J. Cole, or his own music due to the innovative sounds and flows that he's bringing forward. So all in all, I think the biggest lesson to learn here is really just to be yourself. When Yachty stopped caring about what the public thought, about what his next hit would be, about what his next album would sell, and instead stripped it back and just focused on making music that he actually had fun creating, that led him to see the most success that he's ever seen in his entire career, and finally be viewed in that positive light that he's always wanted to have. So for any rapper in a slump, it's important to remember that real music will last. And if you're making something that genuinely sounds and feels great to you, odds are it's only but a matter of time before it'll eventually catch on to the rest of the world. And while I can't personally say I'm the biggest fan of every single track that Yachty produces, I love the experimental direction that he took with his album Let's Start Here, and I'm excited to see what's next for him because he continues to evolve and is showing us that he's more inspired than ever to create groundbreaking sounds and introduce hip-hop to styles, music, and experiences that we've never seen before. But I'm curious, let me know in the comments a documentary on your favorite rapper that you've never seen before, and I will most definitely create it. If you stuck around till this point, please hit us with that little subscription, that like, that comment. Let us know if you think Lil Yachty fell off, if he came back, if he never fell off to begin with, if it's the greatest comeback of all time, if he ruined Drake's career, if he gave J. Cole his best feature verse of all time. Let us know all this stuff in the comments, and I appreciate y'all, and I will catch you in the next one.